Do you have paint chips or scratches on your cupboards? I got these paint pens from Amazon and they came with a syringe. I grabbed the original paint to match the cupboards and I stirred it and used the syringe to fill the paint pen. I placed the brush end on and gave the end a few turns until the paint started to come out. Before touching up my cupboards though, I wiped them clean with a cloth and made sure they were dry. Then I used the paint pen to cover any chipped areas. The brush is really soft and worked well to feather the paint in. I tried it on the tops and front of my cupboards. In some spots, I did 2 coats to really feather it in. And here's what it looks like after it dried. I can't believe how well it worked and how quick it was, so I tried another area in my home that needed touching up. I dropped something heavy down my staircase and it did some serious damage. I wiped the area clean, filled the white paint pen up with the paint that matched my staircase and the rest of the house, and I touched up all the exposed wood parts. It feels so good to have this job done, and now I'm wondering why it took me this long to do it. I hope this inspires you to freshen up your home with these touch-up paint pens.
I found this storage box at the thrift store. To start, I'm going to use some black paint to help cover up that pattern. When painting fabric, I always find it best to water it down a little bit. And now I want to add the brown paint. Thinned it out with a little bit of water as well. And I'm going to use a chip brush to apply it, as it will look more natural with a little bit peeking through the brown. The final step to making my faux leather look real is to cover the paint with wax. The wax gives the paint a really nice supple feel that mimics real leather. I'm thrilled with how good this storage box looks now. I like to use little wooden blocks to raise the piece up off the tarp whenever I'm painting. I've popped this old candle into the microwave until it's soft, and I'm just going to take it and rub it on the edges of the piece and over the hardware. For a piece of furniture that has previously been painted, I like to use a nice thick paint to cover it. This is going to hide all the imperfections and adhere beautifully to the old surface. To paint the top of this piece, I'm actually going to use a wall sponge. The sponge allows me to cover the top quickly and it makes a nice even finish without any brush strokes. While the top is drying, I'm going to go ahead and add a second coat to the rest of the piece. Now that the gray paint on the top is dry, I'm going to take a pot, put my paint in the middle, and add some hot water around it. Glossy paint goes on a little more smoothly when you warm it up. I've put on a pair of gloves now since the can's going to be a little warm to the touch, and after giving it a stir, I'm going to pour it all over the top of my piece. To smooth it out, I'm going to use the same sponge I used before. The last thing I need to do is take a sanding sponge to those edges and hardware where I rubbed the candle at the beginning. The wax from the candle protected those surfaces below and now allows me to add a little distressing without going right down to the wood. My sad little washstand has been completely transformed, and you wouldn't even know it was the same piece. I found this old magazine holder at the thrift store. To start, I've already gone ahead and cleaned it, and now I'm going to give it a coat of paint. I have this piece of lace. To get the lace ready to use, I'm going to spray one side with a very light coat of tacky spray. This will keep the lace in place while I use it. I'm going to mix up another color of paint. Now it's time to use the lace as a stencil. I'm using a small blunt end paintbrush with just a small amount of paint on it, and I'm going to dab up and down all over the lace. Here's a little sneak peek of what's happening. To finish off my box, I'm just going to go ahead and use the same paint to add a little color to the edges. I absolutely love how pretty this looks. The lace painting added just the perfect touch of a pattern. I found this beat up table at the thrift store last week and it's quite damaged. I'm going to start by painting my table white. I'm going to add all kinds of bright colored paint into my container, and I'm going to add some texture into the paint, and I'm going to use the Fusion Fresco powder, but you could use baking soda and mix it into each of those colors. I'm going to start putting it over the stencil, and we want to start just spreading this all over, and I'm going to hold down the stencil as much as possible here. Okay, and once you have your stencil completely covered like this, you want to very gently try and take off a little bit off of the top. We can peel up that stencil. How gorgeous is that? Who would have thought that you could turn a $7 thrift store find into this beautiful piece of art with just a stencil and some paint? To get the table ready, I'm going to start by giving it a quick clean. Next, I want to give it a light sanding. I want to wipe it again. I like to start with the pedestal first and then do the top. I'm going to add and combine some water with some white paint. To apply the wash, I'm going to use this chip brush because the bristles are natural and uneven. To soften up those lines a little bit, I can wipe them with just a damp paper towel. I absolutely love how pretty this table is now and how much the lighter color changes its look.
The next time you are at a thrift store, pick up some inexpensive wicker baskets. Dip the paintbrush in the paint and then pounce. Take the brush and lightly brush the paint onto the basket in the main direction of the basket weave. This basket finish looks fantastic, styled with flowers or green plants. Take a wicker basket with a very light finish. Spray paint the basket in light layers with an oil-rubbed bronze color. Let the basket dry completely. Paint in light layers. You will notice that the paint dries very fast between layers because there is actually very little paint used. I hope this inspired you to give inexpensive wicker baskets an updated look with paint.
I've got an old folding table that needs to be resurfaced. First thing we got to do is get it cleaned up. Next, we need some liquid wood. We're just going to go ahead and start painting away. We're going to go ahead and put that second coat on. You're going to take that graining tool and go back and forth. It's time to stain. Take a lint-free cloth and you're going to take it right off. We're going to use a water-based polyurethane and it looks like a brand new faux wood table.
I'm giving this little side table a makeover. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually give it a coat of black paint. Now I've taken some creamy white paint and I've added water to it. I've ripped up some newspaper and I'm going to apply some of this paint. Taking pieces of the scrunched up paper, I press it into the paint and wiggle it around. Keep repeating the process until you get to the end. Now the tabletop is dry, I'm going to use this stencil. I'm going to give it 2 coats of this gloss decorator's varnish. Here's my finished tabletop. I think it looks quite effective. It's a very easy technique to do. I'm going to apply both these colours, the green and the blue, randomly over the top. I'm now going to apply 1 coat of a water-based top coat. I've used some cardboard and I'm just going to cut one edge, cutting very randomly on the bottom, grooves in it. In here I have some dark green paint and I've combined it with their water-based top coat. I apply the green paint on top and then taking my cardboard, going to randomly scrape into it, okay? So then we go on to the next bit, working just randomly, but I decided to follow some of the contours with a metallic gold gel pen. And here's my finished table. I actually decided to paint the edges gold to tie in the gold that I had done on the top.
Grab your hot glue gun. I'm going to start at one end of the mold and fill it slowly with the glue. The first mold is dry now, so I'm going to go ahead and peel it out. I can trim off any little strings and overflow. I'm going to give it 2 coats of a creamy white paint. Some all-purpose glue on the back of each one will be enough to adhere it to the furniture piece. I'm going to paint them using the same paint that I used on the stand. So I'm going to put a layer of clear soft wax all over everything. I'm going to use some dark wax and a small brush to push it into all of those little details. And do a little sanding around the edges just to add some faux age. It was so easy to add such pretty details with some hot glue and a couple of molds.
Drawn a line straight down the middle of the drawers and I'm going to use a red and a blue paint. When the first colour has dried, I then take the other colour and paint on top of it. Then take your spray bottle and spritz over the wet paint and then set a timer for 3 minutes. When the time is up, we have to start removing the water now. And I use a toilet roll. Now I'm moving on to the top of the dresser and I've split the top in half. Now all my drawers are done and dry and I'm taking a stencil and some modelling paste and applying it to the stencil. I finished off the dresser by doing the stencil again on the top and here it is. I hope you enjoyed this and you're inspired to have a go at this crazy technique.